Sega.
Tetris is one of the most well-known games in history. It's a simple puzzle game where pieces made out of 4 squares, called tetrominos, fall from the top of the screen and you have to rotate and place them in order to make lines, which then disappear, scoring you points. If you happen to complete a 4-row block of lines, that's called a Tetris and scores you more points. Gradually the blocks fall faster, adding to the difficulty, but you probably know this already. This comparison is a little bit different, as we'll look at Sega's involvement with the Tetris brand over the years, both in the arcade and on the PC. First, we'll take a look at the original PC-DOS version of Tetris from 1986. This wasn't the first version of Tetris, but it was the most important. I'll run this using DOSBox. Next, we'll look at Sega's 1988 arcade version, which released on both System 16A and B hardware. I'll emulate this in MAME. Sega also backported the game to the lesser spec System E hardware in 1989, so we'll have a look at that too. 10 years later, Sega released Sega Tetris on the Naomi hardware. This I'll run using the D-Emul emulator. Another 10 years passed and Sega released Tetris Giant on their System SP board. Again, I'll use D-Emul to run this. In 2018, Sega merged their Puyo Puyo series with Tetris, so we'll look at the Tetris side of Puyo Puyo Tetris. The sequel arrived in 2021, so we'll take a look at that too. Finally, we'll look at Tetris Effect Connected as the ultimate evolution of the Tetris concept. Originally released in 2018, but then enhanced with the multiplayer connected part in 2021, this isn't a Sega released title, but it does have a quite strong connection to Sega, which I'll explain when we get to it. The very first version of Tetris was programmed by Alexei Pachinov in the Soviet Union on an Electronika 60 computer. This wasn't a PC as such, so I won't be covering this version in detail, but this is what it looked like. The shot on the left shows the game's initial version, using essentially empty space characters for the tetrominos. But these were swapped for square brackets in a later version, due to the empty space characters not always being available on the hardware. But let's move on to the extremely important DOS version. The DOS version was ported by Vadim Gerasimov with Alexei Pachinov, and after it was shared around in Europe became very popular, leading to the well-known licensing shenanigans that have been covered in books, documentaries and movies. There are 2 versions of the DOS version available around the internet. Whilst the gameplay for both is similar, the licensing had already been changed between version 1.0, shown on the left, and version 3.12, shown on the right. In this video we'll look at version 3.12 as it's newer and has more features. The game begins with this colour cycling title screen and then a page of options where you can choose how difficult to make the game. In-game there is a useful key guide on the left and some statistics on the right. Interestingly, even this early version shows which piece is coming next, which helps you plan your strategy. The game also has a hard drop feature, which snaps pieces to the bottom instantly, but no way to cause pieces to fall slightly faster without increasing the game speed entirely. Sound effects are very sparse, being limited to lines disappearing and a game over noise. There's no soundtrack in this early version. Now, watch a minute of me playing this version. During the initial back and forth of who owned the license to Tetris, Sega managed to license the game for the Japanese arcades in 1988 and released a version running on the System 16A and B boards. This was prior to Atari releasing their arcade Tetris game the following year. The game begins with a copyright message, then this title screen. Some backgrounds are shown, and then the game's mascot, a monkey, teaches you how to play the game in a lengthy demo. After that, the high score table is displayed and the intro repeats. In-game, it plays fairly similarly to the DOS version, with a few features that are now seen as out of date, like the inability to rotate pieces before they're fully on the board or too near a wall. The music is Sega's own tune, which gradually increases in speed the further you play. There is also another tune that plays when you're close to filling up the board. As you play, the background changes with each level, showing various world locations. The initial orange mountains give way to a seaside scene, a picture of an iguana, a somewhat broken dinosaur scene, I'm not sure if this is an emulation bug, some icy mountains, Stonehenge, some tulip fields, and so on. When you get game over, you can enter your name in the high score table. Sega also released various conversion kits for Taito hardware, which uses different audio chips, meaning the sound in each is quite different. Let's compare them. First, here's the standard System 16 version. Here's a conversion for Taito's B-System game Master of Weapon. Another Taito B-System conversion is available for Nastar, which sounds like this. And this is the Taito H-System version. Now watch a minute of the original System 16 version. Keen to expand on the Tetris theme, Sega used the license to develop two unique versions of the game. The first was Bloxeed from 1989. This added special bricks that, when destroyed, delete a number of lines in one go. It also added red bars up the side, fail to complete a line before they reach the top, and the game adds some junk blocks to the bottom of the screen. Most novel of all though are the several special bricks which unleash bonus weapons from other Sega titles. An S releases the attack satellite from SDI, which you can use to zap away blocks. A 16 drops a 16-ton weight from Fantasy Zone. There are some other bonuses too. Sega's second title to riff off Tetris was Flashpoint, also from 1989. This appears to be set in the Fantasy Zone universe, and you are tasked with simply destroying some flashing blocks in each level. Of course, this means often adding or removing blocks to get to the flashing ones. Whilst the first level is easy, later ones get more and more complex. Here I skip ahead to level 6 and promptly fail to complete it. But Sega really wanted to get more copies of the original Tetris into the arcade market and devised a novel way of doing so. The System E board was essentially a Sega Master System for the arcade. This means that the System 16 version would need to face some cutbacks in order to work, but the cutbacks are pretty severe. The intro looks pretty similar, with a copyright screen, a similar title screen, some more licensing information, and then a demo. But you'll notice there is no monkey here, it's very simplified. The high score table looks similar though. In-game, the Tetris part plays the same, with similar music and sound effects, but the changing backgrounds have been replaced with this high-tech blue panelling, which never changes. It makes the game feel like a fraction of the System 16 version. As before, when you get game over, you can input your name into the high score table. Here's a minute of this version in action. Sega wouldn't return to Tetris for another decade in 1999. Using their Dreamcast-based Naomi board, they released Sega Tetris into the arcades, and the monkey was back, this time against a spiky collar-wearing dog for some reason. The intro sequence shows the first level and the monkey. Plus a Tetris being made, which he then slams away with a giant mallet. Again, I'm not sure why. The title screen shows peak Sega Blue Sky goodness. You're then given a long demonstration of how to play the single player game. The main addition here being a slot machine. If you manage to clear lines at the right time and make a row of similar icons in the slot machine, you'll get a big bonus. It's a bit of a weird addition, to be fair. The high score table is then displayed. The intro then shows a high speed level in play, and then the intro repeats with a giant iguana in the background, certainly a nod to the System 16 version. After this, the dog shows you how the two-player mode works, which adds the ability to connect blocks together and perform specific attacks should you clear certain patterns of blocks, including missile attacks and an attack that drops a boulder on your rival's head. It's all very weird, but I'll stick to the single player mode for now. The gameplay for single player has the board over to the left hand side of the screen, which feels a bit odd. I'm not sure why they didn't centre it. I accidentally captured this using the emulator set to Japanese, hence the non-English message on the right. The premise of this game is to travel around the world playing Tetris. The opening scene is on a Sega-styled beach, before moving to the Grand Canyon. Level 2 starts in Shibuya, Tokyo, and then transitions to the South Pole. It's all a bit random, and I didn't get past this location. Now, enjoy a minute of this version without me talking over it. whole decade later, Sega returned to Tetris in Giant form with Tetris Giant. This also used a Dreamcast-derived board called System SP. The main feature of this version is that you play using enormous joysticks with the rotate buttons on top of them. The arcade version was released in 2 different units, with the left-hand one here being the reduced version for arcades that couldn't take the enormous original unit. The intro starts with this colourful title screen
Tetris Giant!
and a quick description of how to use the joystick, and then the rules. This is followed by some demo gameplay. After that, the high score table, showing the top 1,000 players, is displayed using this novel approach of taking you out into space, past planets, constellations, and out into the universe. The game allows single player, along with co-op and versus multiplayer modes.
Single mode!
The single player mode has a line challenge time-based game for beginners and a score challenge for experts. Yes, I'm ready for a difficult game. In-game, you realise the play area is very shallow and not particularly wide. The game is over if one block fails to clear the purple line at the top. This makes it quite tricky to pull off Tetris moves, but I managed some. As you play, you move up the rankings on the left and move into the sky, and ultimately space, should you play for long enough. When you eventually get game over, you can enter your name into the high score table. Now, enjoy a minute of this game in action. This was the first Sega version of Tetris to play the Russian Korobiinki folk song tune, well known from the Nintendo Game Boy version. Sega's next involvement with Tetris was on the PC and home consoles in Puyo Puyo Tetris. This game pitched Sega's own Puyo Puyo puzzle game against Tetris in a number of novel head-to-head mashups.
Sega!
The intro begins with the Sega and Tetris logos before the colourful title screen.
Puyo Puyo Tetris!
Some gameplay is then shown of Tetris versus Puyo Puyo. Each time the intro repeats, a different character shouts out the Sega name.
Sega!
Later demos show a mode where the game switches between Tetris and Puyo Puyo. And the later one again shows a mashup where both Puyo Puyo and Tetris pieces fall in the same game. When you start the game, you can see how many modes there are, with an adventure, solo, multiplayer, lessons and online mode. Solo Arcade has a number of game types, so we'll go into Challenge. Here there are 3 modes for Puyo Puyo and 3 for Tetris. We'll pick Marathon, then choose a character to use.
My time to shine!
In-game, this is a standard, yet pretty version of Tetris. It has all the modern Tetris features, such as being able to hold one piece which you can switch back to later, and the ability to rotate pieces a number of times, even when they've dropped, before they lock in. Eventually you'll fail and get whacked on the head by something. Let's enjoy a minute of this version. 3 years later, Sega released a sequel, which to me feels like more of an add-on package. Puyo Puyo Tetris 2 would be the one to get if you own neither, as it adds more features, fixes, and streamlines the experience a touch. Much like the original, the intro starts with the Sega and Tetris logos, though they lost the voices shouting Sega, sadly.
Puyo Puyo Tetris 2.
You can now dive directly into a Puyo Puyo or Tetris match from the title screen, which is handy. The rolling demos again show Tetris, the switching gameplay mode, and the mashup of both games. Inside the main menu are pretty much the same modes as before, yet there are even more of them. But we'll go back and use the quick Tetris mode from the title screen. This launches the marathon mode, which we played in the original Puyo Puyo Tetris. The graphics have been tweaked a touch, and the music has been made more techno. Plus the background evolves as you move further up the levels. Once again, you get whacked on the head when you lose.
I need to study more.
Here's a minute of this one in action.
Study more.
And now for something very different. I thought I'd include Tetris Effect here in its upgraded 2021 connected form for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it shows how far the Tetris concept can be pushed, especially as it supports VR, but also because it has a sort of family connection with Sega. Tetris Effect Connected was published by Enhance, a company established by Tetsuya Mitsuguchi, a former Sega employee who produced titles such as Sega Rally 1 and 2, Manx TT Superbike, Sega Touring Car Championship, Space Channel 5, Rez, plus was involved in the main scenario of Shenmue. Some of the other people involved in Tetris Effect Connected were also ex-Sega employees. So let's dig into this one. The intro sequence shows the developer and Tetris logos before landing you on the title screen with some inspiring background music. Right away it's obvious that the synesthesia engine which powered Rez is at work here, with particles flying about everywhere. When you start the game you can choose between several modes. We'll go with the journey mode where you gradually unlock all the levels. We'll start with the beginner mode on the first level, the Deep. I chose this as later levels last a lot longer, which can be tiring to watch. In this version of Tetris, all the sound effects are synced to the music, and the joypad vibrates in time to the tune too. It's an all-encompassing experience. The music is provided by Hydelic and perfectly fits the vibe of the game. As the game goes on, the stage evolves and the music picks up. Particle effects swirl undersea creatures everywhere. It's magical. Get the required number of lines and you move on to the next area via this psychedelic sequence. Each level has its own theme and effects, and you really want to unlock the next one just to see what's coming next. Sometimes the visual effects can become a touch overwhelming, but you just have to roll with it. Once this level is cleared, you walk through to something totally different. It feels like you're possibly in some sort of Eastern market. Every stage has a completely different vibe. Upon clearing a sequence of levels, you'll receive your ranking. One unique feature is how you can zoom in or out of the board and even rotate it, so you can make a sometimes difficult game truly hard to play, or set it back to the default and play away. I also need to mention the zone feature shown to the left of the board. When it fills up, you can activate zone mode, which slows everything down and allows you to hopefully get out of a tricky situation. but zone lines don't count to your overall line count, so you cannot finish a level whilst in zone mode. Now, let's take a look at how varied these levels can be. We've got flying windmills in a Da Vinci style, oppressive, evil-looking masks that give way to a crazy fire worshipping scene. This level, called Deserted, which moves from the desert to an astronaut on the moon, covering all forms of being truly deserted. A jazz-themed level, just to show the soundtrack doesn't have to be dance music to work. This firework-themed stage, which starts low-key, but evolves into a true dance floor banger by the end. A balloon-filled stage with a really catchy song. Another oppressive level where fire and ice globes smash together to some dirty drum and bass. And the final stage with its beautiful song and strict challenge. When you hear the chime, you'll know things are about to get very, very fast. Overall, this is an amazing experience, which you really should play, even if you hate Tetris. Watch a minute of this one without me talking over it. Despite all the versions being radically different, let's compare each. We'll look at the single player, 2-player and 4-player mode for the games that have them. Firstly, here's the DOS version in all its simple glory. Wiping across to the System 16 arcade version, you can see how it was tarted up. And now, wiping across to the System E arcade version, you can see how it was tarted down. Wiping to Sega Tetris, you can see no similarities at all, apart from the screen dimensions. Next up is Tetris Giant, which is totally different again, with a bemused looking monkey. Puyo Puyo Tetris is next, and this is where the versions will look similar, as we wipe across to Puyo Puyo Tetris 2, where you can see how it was tweaked in several ways graphically. Finally, here's Tetris Effect Connected, which looks really sparse as it's the start of the first level. So here's the second level, and here's the third level. I haven't looked at multiplayer in this video, but here's the System 16 arcade version in 2-player mode. Both players receive the same pieces, so it's up to each to decide how best to use them. The System E arcade version is similar, but much more cut back. Here's Sega Tetris with its 2-player mode, Monkey vs Dog. And here's Tetris Giant in Versus mode, where there's a battle to receive the next piece. Tetris Giant's co-op mode is more friendly, with you working together and having a shared middle space. Here's Puyo Puyo Tetris's 2-player mode, and here's Puyo Puyo Tetris 2's version. There are many multiplayer modes in Tetris Effect Connected. This is one of them, with 2 virtual fighters battling for the win. Now, some of the games support 4-player mode, for instance Puyo Puyo Tetris, shown here. And again, the tweaks to Puyo Puyo Tetris 2 are fairly minimal. Finally, here's a 4-player mode in Tetris Effect Connected. Let's put all the radically different versions head to head. I'll use the first level in each game. Tetris is probably the most well-known game in history, so it's not surprising that Sega have taken it on a few times over the decades. The original DOS version set things in motion and is, by modern standards, a bit clunky to play. The System 16 version added more colours and sound, as well as 2-player, but still remains pretty basic, although it's not as basic as the reduced System E version. Sega Tetris brought the title back to Sega, but it's fairly uninspiring in single player with its weird slot machine mechanic, though it does have some crazy 2-player additions. Tetris Giant is an interesting take, though without the giant joysticks it feels a bit simplistic. It does, however, have 2 ways to play 2-player mode. Puyo Puyo Tetris and Puyo Puyo Tetris 2 are hard to tell apart, but if I had to pick one I'd say go for the second one, as it has more content and features. If you're a fan of Puyo Puyo as well, these games are hard to miss. And Tetris Effect Connected is one of my all-time favourite games and needs to be experienced. It's just beautiful and a joy to play. If you like this comparison of all things Tetris and Sega, then give it a like. Or subscribe, ring the bell, etc. in order to find out when I upload something new. And join me next time for a classic fantasy quest.